You're listening to Everything Out There with your host, Steve Stockton.
Hello, friends. Hello, once again, everybody. Steve Stockton here with you. Everything Out There on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. Joining me once again tonight, Pastor Eric and Justin from Sound and the Shofar at Messianic Ministries, going to come back to continue their talk about the occult influence in popular culture. Pastors, how you doing tonight? Good to have you back.
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Cold here in New England, but I think it's a lot colder there where Pastor Justin is.
Yeah, it's
it's
negative 12, negative 15. So we just bought a F-250 diesel truck, and I was sharing with Brother Eric. I've learned a lot. Literally, if you don't warm it up, and if you don't keep an eye on the fuel, your fuel can evaporate pretty quickly. But also, if you don't put like this anti-gel in it, it'll keep your truck will be gel. So I've had to learn to get used to doing that. And but yeah, I took that thing up some mountains, and that King's Ranch has got aftermarket stuff. It's got some power. So Alaska's fun. If you ever get an opportunity, you should come up here.
I've always wanted to visit, but I honestly don't think I could live there. I can't do cold weather anymore.
Well, I can tell you that because we're in an area where the Alaskan Triangle is, and it's real stuff. I mean, there is a place. There's a spirit here. There's things here. People I've talked to, some people believe it, some people don't, but there's a lot of things that influence here. Just the weather itself. Yeah, it's weather, but the weather's kind of weird, you know? And, but yeah, it's a real thing. It really is.
Yeah. I've heard from other people that have lived there that there's some very dark energy there, some evil spirits, if you will, that call that place home.
Yeah, well, and a lot of the areas, and this will probably go into the segue of what we're going to talk about, but if you go to various villages, various things, you know, there's people believe that some of the areas that haven't been discovered could have burial sites, but within those areas, there are a lot of portals that are opening up, and just not too far from here, there's people that have disappeared, and they don't know how they disappeared. Granted, it's weather, animals, stuff like that. But you have people that'll vanish and they never see them again. So I think that what we're talking about tonight is a chain reaction of when you go against Deuteronomy 18 and you consult things, or you talk about things, or you make a pact with things. You open up something that's not going to leave your home, and it's going to stay there. So I think that is kind of the segue of what we're going to talk about tonight, and the importance of what has happened to various people historically when they've been in rock and roll or pop culture music or whatever, and the aftermath of their decision, trying to make a pact with things that go against God.
Yeah, and you see that in not only rock music, but just in popular culture. The people bring things into their home and are really unaware of what they're bringing in there. I mean, stuff like that can have attachments. I've heard it said that back in the day, some of those rock records, they supposedly had ceremonies, dark ceremonies over the masters of those albums, and sent demons with those albums so that anytime anybody played that, the demon would be released or could manifest. And
well, if you watch, I think I may have shared this video with you guys, but if you've seen like concerts with a lot of pop culture, they do it right now. They'll just come out and obviously say, I'm doing something for the devil. And people said when they go, they said they feel something coming from the crowd or some ceremony that they're doing. And that is another way. And you also see just within actors from Disney, people that have been in rock and roll or whatever, well, not rock and roll, but now the child pedophilia that's going on. You know, and that was part of the occultic practices in the Torah, the sacrificing of children and stuff. That opens up demonic portals because it's trauma to those kids that's going on. So a lot of things that are things that in our minds we don't see that the Lord sees, that these things are having so much fun with.
It's frightening to think about. And like you said, they're just out in the open about it. At least back in the day, Brother Eric and I talked about that last time, that it was kind of thinly veiled, you know, but it was there if you knew what to look for in the artwork on the albums and the T-shirts and in the lyrics. But now they don't even have any attempt to hide it or veil it or anything. It's just out there, just unabashedly,
Well,
ungodly.
it's because people have been desensitized to it. People are desensitized. Think of the, not trying to veer off on the subject, but I think various well-known biblical Bible believing pastors and even Brother Eric, I talked about this on Sound the Shofar, just with the demonic manifestations with UFOs and stuff. No pastors knocking down the door calls saying, "Hey, did you hear what's going on? I think the Lord's getting ready to return." People are just living like normal. They don't care. They're desensitized. It's what the enemy wants, and it's part of culture, and it's being accepted now. And as the Apostle Paul says, they have fallen asleep.
And then places like in New Mexico, where I used to live, they have a satanic temple there. That's just, these are things that people used to do in secret, and now they do it just in front of everybody without a care in the world.
Absolutely.
So I think it points to the end times. If you look at the things in the Bible, the headlines of today are straight out of the book of Revelation and other parts of the Bible, in my opinion.
Well, I think when me and Eric, Brother Eric, were convening about this, he was talking about, and I'll let you take the wheel on this, Brother Eric, but you're talking about that the guy that we're talking about, who was, I guess, the guitar player drummer, that the Ouija board said that he was going to die.
Oh, yeah. And actually, I think it is, again, I'm not a legal expert. My area is theology. When you have a guy that died, and a year and a half, I think it was, before that happened, they had a Ouija session that he sat on, and there was no activity whatsoever. And then right before they closed, it said Randy will die.
And if you look at the whole rock era, you have a lot of bands that went on to mega stardom, where one of the early members died strangely or tragically. Bands like Led Zeppelin, of course, The Who, Metallica, on and on. You can list a lot of bands where it seems like there was a sacrifice that had to be made for them to be propelled into the mega stardom, the worldwide stardom. And I think it happens too often to be coincidence. I really don't believe in coincidence. I believe in synchronicities, and there you go.
Absolutely. Take a look at AC/DC. Bon Scott, and admittedly, makes a deal with Satan. He dies shortly thereafter. They get another singer completely unrelated and absolutely outsell everything they did with Bon Scott. Metallica lost Cliff Burton in '86. Look at the transition and of the band dynamic and the number of fans between the Master of Puppets album, on the one which Cliff Burton had passed, and that Black album that came out in 91.
Yeah, and they're worldwide, and they're still huge. Their music in that regard is timeless. They still pack stadiums worldwide, and other bands like that.
Oh,
the Rolling
yeah.
Stones, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, all those have lost one of their early members and then went on to just phenomenal things.
Well, think about the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They lose their original guitarist, and the album that follows is titled after Aleister Crowley's Sex, Blood, and Magic. And that album, even though they had a much smaller following before then, that album launched them to international superstardom.
And I believe that was the one that they recorded at the old the haunted studio there in the Hollywood Hills, the Houdini Mansion, I think, or something. It's in that area. Rick Rubin put them all in that house, and they talked about there was manifestations there while they were recording. They saw things, they heard things, and you've got other bands that talk about that. Led Zeppelin talked about that. Black Sabbath, Ozzy's.
John Bonham died in Aleister Crowley's home when Jimmy Page owned it. Yeah. Led Zeppelin became bigger than anything after Bonham had passed and they broke up.
Yep. And there's still, I mean, there's just never been anything like them, and probably will never be again.
No, and speaking as an ex, when I was a teenager and stuff, I was a huge Zeppelin fan.
Yep, same. Zeppelin,
Every one
Iron
of their
Maiden.
songs. Oh yes, Iron Maiden. But every one of their songs, every one of Zeppelin's songs has a very dark, dreary, medieval kind of feel to it.
And they talked about that. Robert Plant talked about when he wrote the lyrics for Stairway to Heaven. He literally said that came from somewhere out in the ether, that it just, he channeled that. He was just sitting there writing. He said he didn't even know where it was coming from. And that's probably, if there is such a thing as a rock anthem, that's it. Everybody knows Stairway to Heaven.
Yes. And ironically, and of course, I never did this before when I was younger as a Zeppelin fan, but after getting saved and stuff, I hear it come on the radio and listen to the words, and it is absolutely the most contrary thing to salvation in Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Purchasing and buying your way into heaven.
There's still time to change the path you're on. There you go. That's like,
yeah. Well, John 14:6, Yeshua said, "I am the truth and the way and the life. No man can come to the Father but through me." Well, change your course, change the path. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, you think about it, and you move it today, and people are more open about things as well, and you see how what happens is when the enemy's done with them, he's done with them. I think that people like, Vince McMahon, WWE wrestling, just came out about stuff about him. And I think when those people are done, they throw them away and they get rid of them because they don't need them anymore. And it's always the same thing, time and time again. You take, for example, we talk about Aaron Carter, what the brother of the Backstreet Boy, who was supposedly suicide. But what was interesting is he had mental health illness, and he was calling out a lot of the stuff, and it was talked about in there that somebody put in his, I guess, like his Instagram, when 2 hours before he died, somebody said, "I'm going to kill you," or "They're coming to get you," and he's taken out. So it's Hollywood, the music, entertainment, all stuff is that is a devil's playground. And when they're done with you, they're done with you. And that's why we're hoping that as people hear this message, that they come to know the Lord, and that if they're involved in this stuff, the Lord can break those curses, because the Lord's death upon the cross canceled all of those things that Satan and his minions think that they have control over, and they don't.
Well, I would like to go into a brief history of the occult and bring it up to today, if that's all right.
oh, feel free. Fascinating stuff.
All right, starting in Deuteronomy 18, and I'm just going to look at 9 through 12, and then we'll discuss it and go into the history. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer, For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord, and because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doeth drive them out before thee. All right, we're talking about Moloch worship, Remphan worship, Baal worship. Now, these were the practices of the Canaanites, of the Hivites, of the Hittites, and all those pagan groups that occupied the land of Israel. This was God's final list of instructions to the children of Israel not to do any of these things, because worship is exclusive to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. From these groups, Hittites, Canaanites, the Sumerians, the ancient Babylonians, even the Egyptians, worshiping of Baal, worshiping of Molech, worshiping of Anubis, of Osiris, of Ra. First of all, we have to understand that every one of these deities are all the same thing. And that takes us back to Genesis chapter 6, with the sons of God fell from heaven. They're demonic spirits. And the forms you see them in, like Moloch, can either appear as a humanoid thing with a cow head, or it appears as a giant owl, depending on the culture and the people. Ultimately, it's a demonic spirit. That's all it is. It is a demonic spirit, and these are demonic spirits that appear in different forms to different cultures and different peoples. Again, it's all the same thing you're looking at, a demonic spirit. And ultimately, it's Satan. Satan is the head of all of it. He's the guy hiding in the shadow behind all of it. Now, as history and time goes on, these occultic practices that are outlined in Deuteronomy chapter 18, they spread to different countries and different nations and such. And as it spread to different countries and different nations, you have groups of people that picked up on it and basically formed secret groups and clubs. And the reason why I say secret is because while these occultic practices had spread, we have to remember that Judeo-Christianity also was spreading to the same countries and nations and peoples. So they would form secret groups that would practice these things in order to avoid persecution from the churches. As time and history have gone on, we have also seen a consolidation of these occultic groups and practices. And as the process of globalization has been happening in the recent decades, all these occult practices have kind of formed into a single entity with, how would you say it, as a single entity with different branches. The occult now, and has been since the beginning of time, it just took the process of time for that to happen. The occult now is the quiet throne in the shadows being set up for the Antichrist. These practices are still practiced. They may have changed forms or altered forms a little bit in their practices, but the practices are still the same. And that includes the sacrificing of one to excel them to prosperity, to recognition. Back in the time of Deuteronomy and among the Canaanites, they would sacrifice women, they would sacrifice their children. And this would give them prominence. This would give them, supposedly, would give them prosperity. So like I said, the rituals may have been altered a little bit, but they're still practicing the same things. When you see bands that had tried tirelessly for a couple years, and no matter how hard they worked and how hard they put their material out, it just couldn't get past a certain fan base or out of a certain area, and then they cave in the industry, and they agree. I believe. I mean, I'm not there at those meetings, of course. Never have been, never will be. I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that they agree. Okay, we will lose whoever, and next album or two later, they're selling out stadiums and arenas, and they're still basically doing the same thing they've been doing. So how did that change? And again,
a supernatural element in there, not to interrupt you, but it would almost have to be.
Exactly. And I believe the occult now that is basically the Antichrist preparer that controls everything from entertainment to media to government. These were the groups that started out as the ancient Canaanites, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, and such. And again, spread to different countries, different nations. The practices were kept in secret. There were many, many branches and factions. And then over the years have been consolidating members and powers. And now, together as a collective, they're controlling everything and they are influencing everything. Now, that's everything I've studied as far as scripture, as far as history, as far as Aleister Crowley's writings, because everything Aleister Crowley practiced in every cult group he was a member of seems to fit the one big one now. And every bit of occult practice that he was into, you could see it was the practices, again, of the ancient times, in the medieval times, all the way up to now. As far as the death of Randy Rhoads goes, you know, they were talking about, oh, well, we came up with the idea for the song Mr. Crowley on the Blizzard of Oz album because, we had the book sitting on a coffee table in the studio. Yeah, because that's just common reading material everywhere in offices, homes, and studios, right?
Right. And I even heard an interview with Ozzy one time where somebody asked him about that. And he said, oh, I wrote that just because I liked the way it sounded lyrically. It doesn't have anything to do with Aleister Crowley. Well, how many Mr. Crowleys are there? And you can tell with the lyrics exactly who he's singing about.
Yeah, Mr. Crowley, what went on in your head?
Yeah.
Did you talk to the dead? Yeah. And I believe, and this is going on Randy's brother's testimony in an interview, Randy had recently became a staunch Lutheran when he had joined. That may explain why he did not party as the rest of the band did. It would probably explain a couple things. I think because according to the band members, he sat in on a Ouija board session, and I think he probably did so, probably kind of knowing what it was, but not really keen to what it truly is. And nothing happens, and then all of a sudden, at the end of the session, the board spells out, Randy, you are going to die. A year and a half later, well, it just so happens he died and no one else. If you take a look at the sales as far as concert tickets go, as far as merchandise goes, number of albums sold, amount of airplay that's given as far as radio and MTV went, from Speak of the Devil to Bark at the Moon, is like a leap from night into day. I mean, the numbers almost tripled within maybe a year's time. Brother Steve, I don't know if you had these albums in the year.
I did back in the
years
day.
ago.
I was a Sabbath fan, and then when they broke up, I still listened to Sabbath, the Mob Rules album, and those, and then I picked up Ozzy's solo work, and I never got to see Sabbath with Ozzy, but I saw them with Ronnie James Dio And then I saw Ozzy as a solo act. I never got to see Randy Rhoads, but I admit to that.
You know, as a kid growing up, I mean, Ozzy Osbourne was the Blizzard of Oz was my world. Well, I got to looking at the albums online just to see, because a lot of times the occult gives itself away in what they're going to do. They just do it cryptically. But I got to examining the cover of Diary of a Madman. And I don't know if you remember the album cover. It shows Ozzy kind of bloody and psychotic, and there's a little kid in a table behind him, and then behind him on the wall there's a upside down cross hanging.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to the left of the inverted cross, as if the inverted cross wasn't a tell sign enough, but to the left of it there's a parchment hanging on the wall, and on this parchment there are two types of writing. The first one is a Greek word, and then under it is a language called Theban. Now, Theban was a Latin cryptic cipher that witch covens and occultists use in order to get their messages back and forth to each other without the church being able to intercept and catch them, basically. And it was invented back in the, I want to say, the 14 and 1500s. The Greek word that's on the parchment is Allah. And Allah is the Greek number 666. And then I got to looking at the cover of Speak of the Devil, which was the album after Diary of a Madman. This was right after Randy had passed. And it's an album of all the songs Ozzy did with Black Sabbath, except it's him doing it with his band. And Brad Gillis from Night Ranger, I believe, was the guitarist on that album for that tour. On the album cover, it shows Ozzy sticking his head through like an archway, and he's got like some gel, blood-colored gel dripping out of his mouth, and he's wearing a pair of fangs. Well, on the archway is this weird writing again. And again, I looked at it, and it's Theban. It's the writing of the occult and witchcraft. So his whole claim and Sharon's claim, oh, we don't have anything to do with the devil or the occult, that's not true.
Yeah.
How many rock musicians know about Theban?
Yeah, anybody who designed that, that was commissioned by Ozzy and his management and the band and everything, they knew what they were doing. That wasn't a coincidence. There's that word again. That was done intentionally. That was a sign, a signal. They were, like you said, signaling their intentions, but most people wouldn't have any idea what it was just looking at it.
No, and not that the average headbanger went to college to study archaic medieval language like Theban. So yeah, of course, everyone probably just looked at it and said, "Oh, that's weird writing. Hey, awesome album cover." So there's a lot of, I believe, there is a lot of evidence that shows that Randy's death was not an accident. I think they forecasted it. I mean, come on, a year and a half before, again, they're sitting around a Ouija board doing a Ouija board session, which is an occultic practice. It says nothing for the whole time until the end, and then it specifically said, Randy is going to die. And then what happened a year and a half later?
Do you think that that's what they were waiting on, that maybe they didn't know which of them was going to die, and then because of what was said in that session, then they're like, okay, he's the one we have to sacrifice. It was spoken to us from beyond. Is that a possibility, you think?
I think very much it could be a possibility. As far as a sacrifice goes, you're offering a I believe, was a new Christian. I mean, would that be valuable to Satan? Would that be valuable to the occult? I believe it would
Absolutely.
be to them.
Yep.
And then there's all the other little intricate details that I think were overlooked in his death. One of the cover stories was the roadie who just happened to be able to snatch a plane, because roadies do that all the time, wanted to commit suicide. Well, that plane went up twice. The first time it took another band member and someone else, no problem. If he wanted to commit suicide, why didn't he do it on that first flight? No, it happened on the flight with Randy. And according to one of the band members, they said the plane was even swooping 6 feet off the ground, and they saw a struggle between the pilot and Randy. I think that's information that really should have been viewed by law enforcement. And again, if you want premeditation, well, go back to that Ouija board session a year ago. Again, like you said, there's no coincidences. And then, of course, you look as far as the occult element of it, look at the success after Randy's death. Randy Rhoads started Quiet Riot. It did everything to get it beyond a local LA club scene, and was able to release an album, but the album was only released in Japan. And a year after Randy Rhoads passes away, Quiet Riot is #1 on the billboards with what was it? Come On, Feel the Noise, and Mental Health. Night Ranger had a fairly good following up until '83. And of course, Night Ranger's Brad Gillis was with Ozzy right after Randy's death, finishes up that tour and goes back to Night Ranger. One song, Sister Christian. All of a sudden, Night Ranger
Superstar. I remember when that was a hit.
3 times larger than they ever were. You take Whitesnake. Whitesnake, had a fairly good following throughout the late '70s and early '80s. Rudy Sarzo, who was in Quiet Riot, who played Ozzy with Randy, joins Whitesnake. '87, they come out with the song "Still of the Night," and look what happened to Whitesnake. 3 times larger than they had ever been, even taking the pop charts. And it seemed like everyone that was connected into Ozzy and to Randy, well, like Aleister Crowley wrote, they sacrificed him and everyone prospered from it.
Yeah, they all benefited from the sacrifice of Randy Rhoads. And I'd never thought about it, and never studied that lineage or lineage there between where Randy had been and where all those bands went and everybody that he touched. You mentioned Sarzo. There's a video out there of Randy playing with Ozzy. I think it's Crazy Train or something, and Rudy's on the bass. And again, Quiet Riot. I remember when they were big. I saw them live. That was a huge, huge album. And I think that was like, 83 or something like that, somewhere around in there.
It was right after Randy's death, probably a little less than a year after Randy's death.
And they were just propelled into superstardom.
Yeah, literally almost overnight. And Quiet Riot had been around since, I think, 1976, when Randy and his then friend and bassist Kelly Garney started the band. And all those years, for whatever reason, they couldn't get outside or past the LA club scene. Randy dies. Well, now they're selling out stadiums worldwide. And again, there were direct connections to Randy. Now, of course, as far as legality goes, this is, again, it's speculation, of course, but
yeah, this is
it
opinion
seems,
only. We don't. This is
yes,
subject to. It is conjecture, but fascinating nonetheless.
yeah, but again, everything seems to tie into the occult.
Are you familiar with the Christian singer by the name of Keith Green back in the 70s?
I've
No,
heard the name, but
I
I'm
may
not
have heard
familiar
the
with the
name.
music. Yeah.
So I was just reading an article here, and they're talking about the correlation between Keith Green and Randy Rhoads. Keith Green, I think in 78 or 77, died in a plane crash, but he was one that gave his life to the Lord. And there's been the belief that Keith Green could have had an influence on Randy Rhoads coming to know the Lord. But what was interesting is they both were prominent figures in music, and both excelled and took it up. Like, I mean, Keith Green took contemporary Christian music, which I wouldn't recommend my dog listen to it, but what it was, took it where it is and where it is. And you guys like Stephen Curtis Chapman. You had the guy who wrote Awesome God, who died. He had influence on the same thing here. But what's interesting in Keith Green's tombstone, and this is what Leonard Ravenhill said. He said, "Are the things you worth living? Are the things that you are living for the worth Christ is dying for?" And according to Keith Green's tombstone, it says, "Gone to be with Jesus." And basically, they were saying that Keith Green was very about the world, about himself, but when he came to know the Lord, his life changed and he died mysteriously. And it wasn't anything like happened to Randy Rhoads. But it's interesting how, if you study the book of Job and how when Satan asked or had to get permission from God, let me deal with your servant. And one of those things that Satan did was he inflicted physical harm against Job, but he couldn't kill him. But it's interesting enough to see that these two that prominently did something and influenced, and the rock and roll Randy Rhoads did, the Lord can use to bring people into himself. He always does a lot of times. But it's interesting how these two were taken out by the enemy and were great, pristine figures in music history. And like Brother Eric said, a lot of these bands were nothing. And then and Randy Rhoads comes along and they jump on his coattails and they're like high and mighty, talking about Whitesnake. Yeah, you Still of the Night. What is the other one? Here We Go Again on My Own. I mean, multiple albums, but then you look at what happens to them when they're done. They're drug addicts or whatever, and they're dead, and they're gone.
Yeah, it's like they have that burst of energy. They're propelled into the stratosphere, and then they explode or implode, and that's the end of it. I mean, that's all you get. That's your shot, and then so many of them have just destroyed their lives, their livers, their selves, through drugs and alcohol and whatnot after achieving that stardom. And I think maybe part of that could be they're trying to escape from what they know is coming, or they've signed a deal, they've signed the contract in blood or whatever. They know this is it, this is all I'm going to get, and then it's over with and it's done, and I'm finished.
Well,
frightening to think about.
You talk about that, and this interesting point. There's a video. I was hearing somebody really trying to explain what they thought the video and this artist was crying out. They cry out when they get into that fame, and they start building up what they want and they want to get out of it. And it's kind of like what the Lord talked about when they kick that demon out, or they think they kick it out, 7 more come. And it's like they're thinking, if I can just get out of this, and it's like all of a sudden, until they come to know the Lord and submit to the Lord, his lordship, and accept him as Lord and Savior in their life, they try to do it on their own. And when they do it, they get dragged right back into it. And it's like these things tangle themselves on them and won't let them go. And that's what happens with a lot of these artists. Like, they want to get out of it, but when they come out of it and they come to know the Lord and their life changes, they either are made fun of, their credibility is destroyed, they're kicked off. You never hear from them again, or they die. So a lot of times, maybe trying to get out of it until they come to know the Lord, they'll never be able to be set free from that pact they think they have with the enemy.
And that's the thing. There is deliverance from it. Now, they come out of it and something still may happen, but their soul can be delivered from that. I want to take a look at Acts 16. Let me get to it here. Acts 16 in verses 16 through 18. And it came to pass, as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with a spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. The same followed Paul and us and cried, saying, These men are the servants of the Most High God, which show unto us the way of salvation. And this did she many days, but Paul, being grieved, turned and said to the spirit, I command thee in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And he came out the same hour. So regardless of the contract, even if the contract is in blood or whatever, by the name of the Lord and the Messiah and Savior, any contract can be broken. And, again, can something still physically happen? Yes. But at the end of the day, Satan and his workers in the occult don't get that person, even in death.
And I remember reading an interview. This is going a lot farther back, but an interview with Little Richard Penniman, who was somewhat of a wild man, a rock and roll legend at the time. He talked about that when he was in the thick of things, that he was, participating in blood drinking rituals and things like that, aberrant sexual behaviors, things he was just totally immersed in this. But then when he got saved and accepted Christ, he was taken out of all that and lost the desire for all the drugs and the promiscuity and things. So there's an example right there. And I think he's a preacher.
Absolutely.
If I'm not mistaken. If he's still alive, I'm not sure if he's still around or not. But
no, are we talking about Little Richard?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. No, he died, I think, a few years ago. But I'm telling you, that man, he got up there and he was preaching, and it wasn't. There was a change because he was different. I mean, he was boldly preaching the gospel, and he was telling people. And even before he died, he was making his goal to go tell those people, come to know the Lord and repent. And he when he preached, it was spirit filled. And yeah, he talked about where he said those things would come at him at night and manifest and would torture him and attack him. But he said the day that he became a believer and accepted the Lord, everything changed. And he said that when he did, his fame went away, like he lost everything. But he said, I would rather lose everything than to lose my soul or to lose the Lord.
Well, look at the story of Robert Johnson. And this was basically when Satan entered into the music industry. The old Mississippi blues player, according to people that knew him, said he did nothing except just make noise, twangy noise on his guitar at the little place he used to play at, and people complained. They didn't come to see him, they complained. And he disappears for 2 weeks. and goes to the crossroads in Mississippi, which is still there, and makes a pact with Satan. He comes back 2 weeks later. All of a sudden, he's an experienced guitar player. And a lot of people say, oh, that's just legend. That's just legend. I don't think it is. I mean, Robert Johnson, even toward the end of his life, talked about it and even wrote songs about it. What was that one song? Hellhound on My Trail? And he talks about how the demons are coming after him.
Yeah. And probably, again, not a coincidence, but Led Zeppelin covered some of Robert Johnson's tunes.
Sure did. They sure did. There are certain Zeppelin songs when you're listening to Jimmy Page play, and it's almost like listening to Robert Johnson. There was a big Robert Johnson influence there, definitely, and especially in the more bluesy songs Zeppelin had.
And again, I feel like they were paying homage, if you will, to people that came before them that they were following in their path. Aleister Crowley, Robert Johnson, and on and on.
Do you remember? And I think we may have touched on it last session. Do you remember the story of John Todd?
Yeah, I had some of his. I had some of those tapes. I heard those on like a Wednesday nights. The church that I was going to at the time, I was a teenager. They did a series and played those. I think several, like maybe a dozen Wednesday nights or so. And it was, yeah, the guy did an expose of the whole industry, and then he was discredited and defamed and died. I don't think he died in prison, but he was in prison. Did he die in prison of cancer? But I've heard from, the conspiracy theories and stuff that was injected in him, that was given to him just to get rid of him and shut him up, because he was revealing a lot. That was the first person I heard talk about a lot of this occultism in the industry, and he knew a lot of those big names from that era in the 60s and 70s. And if even a tenth of what the man said is true, it's chilling. It chills the blood.
Well, it's very interesting, because he not only warned against the secular and specifically heavy metal, but he warned against Christian music, that it was in it also. And so far, almost everything he said concerning the occult and the music industry, look at it now. Almost everything he said was true. Now they don't hide it. They don't even hide it. You look at award shows. You look at like the halftime shows for Super Bowl and other big sporting events. Oh my God, they're not even hiding it anymore. Satan is right out in the open. In fact, they make it as evident as possible, I think, now.
Yeah, I agree. From the costuming to the symbolism, the hand signs they do, the pyramid sign, the eye in the pyramid, some of that stuff. It's not even thinly veiled. It's right out in the open.
The sexual perversion on stage now.
Well, you're having a lot of Christian artists coming out and supporting things against Scripture. You recently had at the Dove Awards, you had so-called Christian artists supporting transgenderism, wearing dresses and all sorts of stuff, and nobody said anything. It was okay. Well,
like you said, they desensitized us over the years.
Yeah, they and it's crept in, and people, and I've been in a service where Joy and I have seen this, and somebody brought in one of those songs And it was about what you've done for me, about I excelling. And it was so demonic that it destroyed the service. And you have to be careful with what you're hearing, with what you're listening to, because those same spirits that, like Alistair Crowley and them had, it's blatantly evil. We know that. It says that. But it creeps in. It creeps inside churches. It creeps inside music. And when it does, it creates the spirit of Jezebel, all sorts of things. And so if you are not filled with the Lord, if you're not doing as, I want to go to the scriptures and read this if I can find it. On this verse. 1 John chapter 4 tells us, 1 John chapter 4, starting in verse 1 to 6, Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses Jesus Christ that has come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming and now is in the world already. Little children, you are from God and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than he is in the world. They are from the world, therefore they speak from the world, and the world listens to them. We are from God. Whoever knows God listens to us. Whoever knows it from God does not listen to us. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. So we're called to test the spirits, and that word testing involves, through the lens of Scripture, through the power of the Holy Spirit, to listen, to assess the Word. Does it go with the Word of God, and does it not? And it says that, talks about the spirits, the battling. One is the spirit of Antichrist, small, that was going on in the world. But then it talks about two spirits, one that is greater than you, the one that's more superior than the one that's in the world, which is the spirit of Antichrist. And he's telling us that we are from God and they're not. And those who are not of God are going to hear from the one who is in charge of this world. So it's imperative that we test the spirits and know what they are, so that we're not caught off guard by listening to music or whatever.
Well, and here's something else interesting. I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but the same year that John Todd got saved and began to do his campaign at churches to talk about occult in the music was 1974. It was 1974 that Ozzy's wife's father took over and became the head of Jet Records. So again, I don't know if that has anything to do with anything, but it's just interesting that it all happened the same year.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, I don't think there are coincidences in this. It may be kind of far-fetched, to connect the dots, but I believe they're there to connect in this regard.
Yeah, I do too.
Now, what in your opinion has changed? You said, we've been desensitized to these things and stuff, but is that where it all began? Was it part of a plan? There was a Paul Harvey thing that I listened to not too long ago. It was from the early 60s, and it was called If I Was the Devil.
If I Were the
And
Devil. Yeah.
have you ever heard that? It's amazing, just the bit of prophecy that's in there, because everything he mentioned, that's the way things are now, and that's 50 something years ago that he spoke those words.
Yeah, I think Paul Harvey saw it with the hippie movement. Well, the overall big pit, what's the end game here? And the end game is Revelation chapter 13. The Antichrist assuming authority over the entire globe, over the entire globe's population. And, of course, he can't just show up and go, "Hey, I'm here. Everyone follow me." That's not going to work. So there has to be a process to it, a very lengthy process where each generation that's closer to the time of the Antichrist is going to be more willing and more accepting than the previous one. And I think that process has been done.
Just a
To
gentle
where
wearing
stuff,
down over time to where what used to bother you, it doesn't seem as bad, and now you don't even care. So it's just, again,
yeah,
it's desensitization. It's
boiling
just,
a frog.
exactly.
Again, the Antichrist can't just show up and say, "Here I am," and everyone's going to go, "Oh, yay, okay." No, it doesn't work like that. So people have to be worn down. They have to have their brains trained and changed to where stuff people have abhorred at one time now look at and go, "Oh yeah, okay, cool." And that was a process, and I think
And it points to the word programming. I mean, the television programming, radio programming.
yes,
Radio stations have a person
programming,
that's their job,
propaganda,
programmer. Yep.
exactly.
And then you get into that. We talked about Led Zeppelin, and we touched on this last time. The Led Zeppelin curse, all the death and misfortune that's followed. It wasn't just John Bonham. Uh, Robert Plant lost a son to some strange stomach ailment. They had a vehicle crash in Wales that I think crippled him for a short time. There's all kinds of things you can see where they're paying for the wealth and the excess and all these things. It's taking a human toll throughout all this. And again, like the thing with Randy Rhoads, and I think the excuse was that the guy shouldn't have been flying the plane, and he was the second time trip up, he was going to like buzz the tour bus and scare him or something like that. And that's when he ended up crashing. But again, that's just the cover story, and dead men tell no tales. So who knows what the real impetus was behind that. And in this case, I think it had to do with Randy being the chosen one, the sacrifice, if you will. And again, if you look at all the people that he had touched, that he had been in contact with, and the degree of success they had after his death.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. The circumstances of a roadie getting a hold of a Beechcraft plane makes no sense. The fact that the tour buses were there absolutely makes no sense. This was in May in Florida, and the tour bus was there, according to the claims, to have the AC units repaired. Okay, well, I can understand that. However, why in the world would you stay in big metal buses in Florida in the month of May? Why wasn't everyone put up at the hotel and the buses left at the place to be repaired? That didn't make any sense.
No.
Again, this roadie, this roadie getting a hold of that 1955 Beechcraft plane makes absolutely no sense. And by the way, they said he had just recently got his license or whatever. I don't think you could fly around doing tricks after just recently getting your license. That would take a lot more time and training to be able to do.
I agree. I read a book one time about the stunt pilots back in the day with the biplanes and the old silent movies and stuff. And they talked about how much more difficult it was to pretend like you did know how to fly a plane and do those tricks and dives and things where it looked like they were going to crash and they'd pull out. So, yeah, somebody that had just got their hours in and got their license wouldn't normally be doing things like that, be doing stunts and trying to buzz the tour bus And yeah, the one story about it was observed just a few feet off the ground and things, that's just insanity.
It is. It is. And like I said, just I'm shocked that so much of that was just dismissed and not looked at. And I think the saddest part is that, and if you ever watch interviews with Randy, he absolutely did not have the star attitude. He was very soft spoken. He was also very humble, and he was very friendly. Just a good individual who was talented beyond belief as far as guitaring went. Died, and this has been over 40 years of injustice. The guilty got away with it clean. And that's just, I think that, I mean, besides being absolutely incredibly wrong, it's just sad. And Randy's mother passed away a couple years ago with no sense of this justice being rendered and solved. And to me, again, that's just very sad.
I think you're more familiar with the accident than I am, but was there an inquest? Was there an investigation? Or did they just take what was said and say, okay, it was just an accident. He was took the plane up, didn't know what he was doing, goofing off and killed somebody. Is that as far as it went, as far as law enforcement looking into it, or do you know?
As far as I know, it was an open and shut case. I could be wrong, but it seems like it was just an open and shut case. Oh yeah, guy was fooling around, crashed, sad death. Too bad. What I do find curious is the first phone call wasn't to first responders. The first phone call that was made was from Ozzy's wife, and she called her dad, the head of Jet Records, to let him know what.
Conjecture here, but the deed's been done. The fix is in. The sacrifice has been made. Off we go. Again, that's
could very
my opinion on a possible thing there. I'm not saying that's the truth, but I'm not saying it's not either. It's just
could very well be, brother. It could very well be. From what I understood, the research that I did, it took NTSB over 2 hours to get out there, which that doesn't make a lot of sense either.
That would give everybody time to get their story straight, remove or destroy any evidence or anything like that. Now, I think there was allusion to drugs being involved, which that wouldn't surprise me either. I mean, as a rock band in that era, cocaine was everywhere. I never was a participant in anything like that, but it was all around on stage and off during that time. It was just a thing. But I don't know.
That's
not.
One of the stories given is that, Randy wanted to go up and take some aerial photos. Well, it was also a known fact that Randy absolutely hated to fly, unless it was absolute, for touring or other reason, unless it was absolutely necessary. According to people that were closer to him, said he hated flying. So why would someone who hates flying voluntarily go up when it doesn't have to be done?
Well, and especially knowing their license in an unfamiliar borrowed plane makes no sense.
Not to mention, he is now a success. Was he really willing to risk his success? Because he would also know that as soon as that plane landed, what are the chances of police or security being there waiting to arrest whoever took up that plane, because the plane was stolen and he knew it? So why would he risk that? See, again, there's so many little things that it doesn't make sense to the story that's being given.
And the fact that, like you said, that his mother, who was they were very close, from what I understand, she never felt that justice was served. As far as I know, there were no charges or anything to the supposed perpetrator. As far as I know, it killed everybody in the crash. So there you go. Blame it on. I don't know. It just there's a book in there somewhere if somebody hasn't already written one about
it. Yeah. Yeah, and very sadly, not just Randy dying unfortunately, but the band's hairdresser, Rachel Youngblood, who certainly didn't do anything to anyone, also died innocently, which is very sad as well.
Just the whole thing is very curious. It's like I said, it smacks of a conspiracy, a cover up, something. There's too many loose ends, too many things doesn't add up, red herrings, whatever. And again, the people left to tell the story, their version is the only version of it that there is.
Yeah, and the only version that anyone's really listening to as well. And to show you how many how everyone's account is contradictory. Even the time Ozzy gives that he said it happened is an hour off, and he was there.
Well, what's interesting is, like I said, I don't know much about this, just what I've learned. It goes to show you that Satan was going to protect his people. The enemy's going to protect his people, and and he's got to deceive these people because, oh, you made a contract with me, and I got to keep using you because in the end, I'm going to get your soul, and they're always protected, even when, you look at. You're reminded of Psalms when David was wondering, why do the evil appear to be successful? Well, because the enemy is because that's the desire that God has turned them over. You look in the book of Romans, they've been handed over to those desires. And these people have exchanged the truth of the Lord for a lie. They want popularity in rock and roll. So what happened was an innocent person had to die. So therefore, Satan's going to protect them. And a lot of times, justice here on this earth will never happen. But every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess that Yeshua is Lord. They will stand before God and give an account.
Yep. Well, and the other thing I think should be considered, especially to anyone who is involved in this world, ultimate end game for it is one thing, and I want to go to Revelation and look at that. Revelation chapter 21. Revelation 21 in verse 8. But the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. The only inevitable conclusion to a pact with Satan or involvement with the occult is what I just read. That is the end of it. And that time will come. It has one end, and that end is hell. Forever. Time unending.
Indeed. And I was looking up some facts here about that and the whole crash and everything. Yeah, none of this makes sense. The timelines are off. The eyewitness testimony, if they were eyewitnesses, is off, and that's they have trouble with that in court. Even people that say they were there and saw things, and eyewitness testimony is usually flawed. And when I was in pre-law, we had a professor that proved that one time. We were sitting in a lecture hall. A guy runs in one of the side doors, snatches another student's purse off her desk, and runs out the other door. And he's like, "Now stop! Nobody move. Let's talk about how we're going to describe this to the campus police." And people were given the description of the guy, what he looked like, what he did, and then the professor would interject things. Well, what color scarf did he have around his neck? Oh, this person says it's red. It was blue. Well, it turns out in the end, he wasn't even wearing a scarf. You could put things in people's mind that they suddenly remembered because it was all a put on. He brought the guy back in and he said, now this is what it was. It was a guy wearing like, can't remember the type of boots that were popular, dingo boots, and a pair of dingo boots, blue jeans, a black t-shirt, and a Levi's jacket. There was no scarf, no sunglasses, all these things that people remembered. So even in the best of cases, eyewitness testimony is flawed, but in this case, if they even witnessed it, again, I think there's more to this story. I really, really do.
I'm right with you. I'm right with you. I believe there's way more to it than that. Than what was being told. Absolutely. And the other problem is, as you go along in time, the further you get from the event, the game of telephone ends up becoming prevalent. Remember the game telephone?
Yeah. Where one person starts it out, whispers it to the next person, and it goes on, and then, but at the end, the last person,
by the time it gets back to the original person,
it's totally changed, totally a different story. Yep. And I've delved
exactly.
into some of the urban legends and things, and that's the way those are. And things that I heard growing up as the gospel truth, they happened. It just happened right up the road. A friend of a friend, and I was blown away when I read a book, Jan Harold Brunvand, taking apart a lot of those urban legends and pointing out. And I'm like, well, I heard that as a kid. It happened where I lived, but everybody heard that as a kid, and it happened where they live, and maybe it didn't even happen at all. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I would say there's absolutely an occult tie to it that I see as far as evidence goes, and also just I guess from a legal standpoint, I think there's a lot of stuff that was just either overlooked or blatantly not looked at, because it doesn't make any sense at all that he was even on the plane to begin with.
Yeah, apparently the plane was a Beechcraft F-35 Bonanza. It was an
1955. Yeah.
Yeah, illegal flight. Looking at the I guess this is the one of the databases about the crash. An unknown or illegal flight. 3 fatalities. Aircraft damage written off beyond repair. The pilot, who was a rock group driver, took an aircraft from the hangar without permission to joyride members of the group during the second flight. The aircraft wing hit the bus during one of several low passes over the area. The aircraft then hit a tree in a residence. A post-crash fire occurred. The cause is listed here in their investigation as judgment poor, pilot in command, buzzing performed, pilot in command misjudged. They crashed into a house while buzzing Ozzy Osbourne's tour bus. 3 members of the Ozzy band, Randy Rhoads, who was 25, Rachel Youngblood, the stylist, and Andrew Aycock, the tour bus driver, who was piloting the plane, were killed. And this is from an NTSB source. So again, the tour bus driver stole a plane and killed all of them. So what's wrong with this picture?
Yeah, exactly. Just the whole thing does absolutely not make a bit of sense. I mean, one, I think planes would be locked up and locked away.
And you certainly would leave the keys in the ignition if you thought somebody could get to it. And
exactly, I would think. I would think keys would be locked up in a security office, and that the owner of the plane would probably have to prove and show ID and stuff to even get access to the key. So again, I have a hard time buying the whole story with Aycock getting a hold of the keys in the plane and then taking it. Does not make a lick of sense.
Is it possible that Randy Rhoads could have been drugged or something? He passed out. And they put him in there?
No. As a matter of fact, it was noted by every one of the band members, and including family members, he did not party or get drunk or do drugs.
That's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, was it possible that he was drugged up, not him? Like
I see. Okay, I see what you're saying. According to, I think it was Bob Daisley from the band, when the plane was kind of strifed the ground, where it was 6 feet above the ground. According to him, he saw Randy fighting with someone, with the pilot possibly. So based on that, I would say it wouldn't seem like he was drugged up.
Was he taken up? Do you think he was lured to go into that, or was he taken up by force, like gunpoint or something?
Possibly, if I was to put together the picture, and again, this is all speculate. This is all speculation and just my opinion. But if I was to put together the picture and the occult thing is true, I would say information was gotten about Aycock that was terribly life-altering, damaging. So they were able to force him and the other two, possibly by force, put on the plane, and then all three, it was the perfect way to get all three out of the picture. And as Brother Steve pointed out, dead man tell no tales. So I think it would have been more of a scenario like that.
So basically,
because again, it doesn't make sense that they were even camping there, because May in Florida is fairly warm, and in a metal and glass tour bus, it's going to be twice as hot. Why wouldn't they have put everyone up in a hotel?
Well, and plus too, it sounds like with those three, it sounds like that was the sacrifice. Like, we're going to get you up in it, and we're doing this for whatever, and that was the sacrifice, because it's very similar to what a lot of terrorists will do when they get on a plane or they're conducting jihad or whatever. We're going to kill ourselves for the sacrifice of the cause, be martyrs or whatever. That's what it sounds like to me. Like that was the sacrifice, and after that, that opened up for everyone to jump on the fame or get to excel in popularity, whatever.
And then that kind of puts me in the mind of some of those horror movies like The Omen, where they knew what they were doing, but it was a sacrifice. They had to do this because, it was for the greater good of their cause and things that they would willingly, throw themselves off a roof or hang themselves or whatever. But Randy may have not been so willing. And I was just looking around here on a message board on the internet about this. So this is pure conjecture as far as I know, but supposedly after the crash, Rudy Sarzo found Ozzy in a church crying uncontrollably, and that Sharon knew that the pilot had killed someone else in a crash, but said or did nothing to warn anyone. And Randy, terrified of flying, but flew anyway and was not known to use drugs at all. However, now this is alleged, this is somebody's opinion, that the pilot was said to have been up all night doing drugs and drinking the night before. So,
well, think about this.
Again, it does.
And this person further states that I'm quite familiar with the layout of the Bonanza. If they were flying that close to the ground, anyone watching would have had an unencumbered view inside the cockpit. So as far as maybe Randy came to if he had been drugged, because he was not a drug user, so maybe they didn't give him enough, and he came out of it before it had taken place, and maybe he wasn't such a willing participant. And they're conjecturing here that maybe Randy tried to take control of the plane when he saw what the guy was doing, which that, an emotional reaction like that would be common, but that would, could have just made it happen sooner.
You think about,
or they could have been, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, or they could have been forced by gunpoint.
This is interesting because there's a correlation to an event that happened probably 30 or 40 years before this happened. And I don't know if there's any correlation or anything like this, but what happened in 1959 was the day rock and roll died. Those three that died in the plane crash, Buddy Holly, Big Bopper, and Richie Valentino, whatever his name was, they died. But what's interesting though, when they died, those three were gone. A lot of people jumped off their coattails and got popular. Granted, that was probably more talked about more than this, but there was a lot of theories about that. Somebody took a gun, took him out, or whatever. Waylon Jennings was in Buddy Holly's band, and there was a coin toss between the two, and he made the claim. He said, something about somebody dying, and they die, and granted, I don't know if there was.
Supposedly, Waylon said when he lost the coin toss, because the heat was out in the bus, they were in like the Midwest somewhere in the middle of winter, they were freezing to death, they were getting sick, and that's why they chartered a plane. And after the coin toss, Holly quipped something like, "Well, I hope you freeze in that bus," and Waylon said, "Yeah, well, I hope your plane crashes." And there you go. And he said that haunted him for years, that those were the last words he ever said to Buddy Holly. And it happened.
Yeah. And now, was there anything behind it? I don't know. But it's interesting how after those three died, how various unknown people popped out of nowhere. People just who had no talent started getting popular, moving forward in music. And there was a lot of people, a lot of artists said if they had not been taken out or had not moved on, a lot of various forms of rock and roll and things would have not picked up. So I think there is a correlation here with Aleister Crowley, with Satan, and with music, because like Brother talked about in part one, and he referred to Ezekiel, King of Tyre, talking about how Satan was this beautiful musician. And there is something where there's a sacrifice made somehow, and when it's made, these things have the authority to do what they do. And those people that are loyal disciples or whatever, who think they're loyal disciples, get the fame and fortune as a result of this.
Well, I mean, all throughout music, there are, or recent rock history, there are deaths that make zero sense, and even to people like me who who are not trained in law or anything like that can look at and go, that's not right. There's something very not right about that situation. You take a look at the death of Jimi Hendrix, for example. Jimmy did not like the band that the record label put together for him. He did not like the record label and was going to leave that label and that band, and he did. He replaced what was it, Mitch Mitchell, Noel Redding with Buddy Miles and Billy Cox, and went to a whole other, I think it was an independent label. And then shortly after, he dies. But he dies in a very strange way. You know, they said, oh, he died from a drug overdose. Well, no, he died from vomit asphyxiation. He was on his back and he threw up and died like that, from what I understand. Well, again, I got some questions here. How come that happened after he threatened to leave the industry and try to go on his own? And what trained paramedic would take a victim who may have overdosed drinking or drugs and was throwing up, but would strap them down and have them laying on their back? That doesn't make any sense. And so, again, I'm not saying, well, that's what happened with Jimi Hendrix, or that they took him out because he left the major label and so forth. But that death seems very questionable. Kurt Cobain's death absolutely does not make any sense as far as how he died, where he died, and the circumstances. It doesn't sound right. It sounds like there's some serious problems and questions that need to be asked there. And again, the list goes on too.
Well, if you don't get in line with their program, or if you don't get in line with the enemy's program, you get taken out. Or when you become a believer, when you become a believer and walk away from it, they try to make life miserable for you, attack your credibility, even try to kill you sometimes. You know, take, for example, when people, veering off of our topic and moving to something else, think about how many people that have mysteriously found or recorded these creatures like these Nephilim beings and stuff, and how the government or various people will try to take them out. It's the same thing. If you know something, or if you don't get in line with something, they're going to try to instill harm upon you because they don't have control of you, and you're messing or pulling their plan.
I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Because if you think about it, they're saying, "Look, we got a deal here. All we want you to do is do this message, and we're going to give you everything." But when they realize that what Yeshua said when he told the woman at the well, the water that you thirst for now, you will continue thirsting, but the water I give you, you will never thirst again. And it's the same thing as fame, fortune, whatever. It only goes so far. And
you can't take it with you afterwards.
You can't take it with you, and it does no good. Just like how stupid Satan was, how arrogant he was when he tried to get the master. If you bow before me, I'll give you everything. And the Lord's like, I own everything. What are you talking about? And he said, no, depart from me, and that's the thing is, it's the same thing as when they realize they can't take everything, and this stuff sucks the life out of them. and they want to get out, and the enemy's like, no, we made a contract. No, I'm not going to let you go.
But as I've heard many lawyers say, contracts are made to be broken. And we've got the best lawyer there is.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely. Well,
again,
and
I think that's part of the deception is these people that have literally sold their souls for rock and roll, they think that there is no escape. I've already signed the contract. I'm done. I better enjoy this while I can and get everything because, afterwards it's the fires of hell. But it doesn't have to be that way.
no, it doesn't. And again, like we just read a little bit ago in Acts 16, through the Lord, any contract can be broken because he's above any contract.
Any of that stuff, it's just a name, and the word says that God gave his son a name that is above all names. It doesn't say some names are above all contracts or what I'm trying to say there. The name of Yeshua Jesus is above all names. It doesn't. That's it. That's the pinnacle. Nothing that's done can't be undone through the Lord.
Well, that's like these manifestations. These things we talk about when people are taken up or whatever, they call upon the name of the Lord and they're never bothered again. Even if they are bothered again, these things disappear because they cannot stand up against him. Because even in the scriptures, the demon said, "Are you here to destroy us now?" They had to get permission.
And the fact that the demonic spirits knew that he in the end he's going to destroy it all. So they knew, and that's why they asked, "Are you here now to do that?" And if the Lord wanted to, he could. I mean, he's following everything that he laid out for history to happen. But yeah, even the demons themselves knew they're powerless against him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one scripture where Christ is just walking by, and then the demons that were in the person cried out, "Why do you torture?" So he wasn't even paying any attention to them, just being in his presence. It was torture for those demonic spirits.
Absolutely. Because if you think about it, Satan's not stupid. Satan was there when the Bible was written, when it was canonized. He knows what's coming. Satan absolutely knows his demise is coming, and it's coming soon. And Satan's end game is not to defeat God. He already knows he cannot defeat the Lord.
Yeah, he is.
His end game is how much of God's creation can I take down with me when I'm finally done away with? And that's his end game.
Now, do you think the people that profess to be followers of Satan or members of the Satanic Church thing, do they actually think that something's going to happen there and that evil is going to triumph in the end, despite the crucifixion and death and the blood of Christ that was shed for all this? Do they really believe that, or I think they've just been deceived because it's not going to turn out that way? But again, you talk about a persuasive enemy. He was able to take I think a third of the angels with him when he was cast out of heaven. So there's some powerful powers of persuasion, and I think one of the names is the Prince of Lies. So there you go.
Well, and that's actually a really, really good question.
But why would you follow something or someone, some entity, some power that has already been defeated? That would make no sense, but then none of this is supposed to make sense.
The Church of Satan is a walking contradiction within itself. because if you ever talk to members of the church or followers of it, they tell you, well, we don't believe in God and we don't believe in the devil. They're hardcore atheists.
Yeah, I've talked to
But
people
when
who
you
say that we don't even believe in the devil, that we're gods, we are God, and but yet there you go. It's a contradiction.
well, and the problem is if you ever watched any of their ceremonies, everything begins with "Hail Satan." So you're hailing something that you don't believe exists. And then if you take a look at Anton LaVey's book, the Satanic Bible, for them not to believe that God exists, and in fact that their religion is a hatred to that, which I think it is. I don't think it's atheistic at all. If you look at all the precepts of the Satanic Bible, Anton LaVey had to have gone through the book of Leviticus and the law in order to write that book, to make it completely 180 degrees opposite, because every rule that they have is a direct contradiction to a law of God.
Yep.
So personally, I don't buy we're atheists. I don't believe that at all. If you listen to them and you look at some of their material, they believe or they know there is God, and they are what they are, and the religion is what it is because it hates God. So it embraces a literal Satan.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at LaVey for just a moment here. Now, I've heard it said that he didn't even believe in all this, that it was just a way he found that he could con people and feather his own nest, so to speak, because he had been working on a sideshow like as a barker and a organ player and like a girly show or something like that. Do you believe that he was serious about what he was doing, or was he just a tool of Satan to start this movement and carry on the evil deeds? Do you believe that LaVey was serious? I don't know. Like I said, I think he was, because he had all the trappings and everything, and it's hard to say. But I'm just asking for your opinion on that.
Just my opinion. If you look at the church today, because his daughter took it over, I would say it was serious enough that it's still around today, long after his death. I think he may have started out as a con, possibly. But when you look at his level of study into the occult, and especially Aleister Crowley, and especially some of the famous members he had, if it started out as a con, it definitely ended with him believing it.
Yeah, that I would agree on that opinion. Yeah, you had people like Jane Mansfield, Sammy Davis Jr., a lot of these people that weren't the super stellar elite, but people that were household names and things.
And even in more modern times, Marilyn Manson.
Yep. There's a picture of
and
him
some various other members. Jimmy Page. Now, I never read anything that he was involved with LaVey's church, but Jimmy Page, even to this day, is a very serious occultist, and a lot of the stuff that he believes, a lot of it is LaVey's.
Yeah, he was seriously into magic, and he complained about not being able to find certain occult books and things that he wanted, so he opened his own occult bookstore. I think it's called the Equinox, and he collected
Yes.
personal belongings of Crowley. He had like a Crowley museum in his house, or one of his houses, I think, of things that he collected that had belonged to Crowley. So it's definitely, if he wasn't a follower, it was definitely some sort of hero worship or an admiration, and the teachings are evidence, and then are evident in the music and the lyrics and the deeds and things that Zeppelin did. I think that maybe the others not so much, but I think Page, in my opinion, was the impetus behind all that influence in Led Zeppelin, and it propelled them to just mega stardom. I mean, there's no bigger band than Led Zeppelin.
And plus, too, it's people even in the generations today still listen to the band. They still have the shirts. Like even the kids that are coming up are tired of the music that's going on today, and they're listening to this stuff today. So it's carrying on as the agenda was supposed to be.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with Brother Justin 100%.
Yes, me too.
I would say also, Satan, I think heavy metal was the foot in the doorway into the music industry for Satan. But now, when we were coming up, there was divisions in music. Yep. There was heavy metal, and there were heavy metal followers, which were different from pop and pop followers, which were different from country and country followers, and disco and so forth and so on. It's now all jumbled up into one big mess. Country is now involved with hip hop, is now involved with rock, is all jumbled up into pop now. And I think, like I said, I think in the 70s it started, or in the 60s, it started with rock, and then Satan weaseled his way into all genres of music and now runs it as one big conglomerate.
Yeah, and I think that's a very apt description. It's widespread. It started out, like a mold spore, and then it just spread, and the tentacles are everywhere.
Absolutely, that's what I think.
Film, television, all kinds of media.
Yeah, and again, and especially with the Rolling Stones, Aleister Crowley influenced them. If you remember, the same year that Sgt. Pepper's came out, where it had Crowley's picture on the upper left-hand corner, the same year that Rolling Stone album came out, had Crowley's picture on it. And then a couple years later, what ended up happening? Mick Jagger ended up playing Satan in Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising. And then, of course, that famous song, Sympathy for the Devil.
Yeah.
How many, after Mick Jagger sung that, how many years later until he died?
Oh, Mick Jagger's still around.
Yeah.
Okay.
My gosh,
jokingly
he's in his
heard
80s,
them called as so the Rolling Stones are the Strolling Bones now, because I think they're in their 80s or something like that.
I'm thinking somebody else. What's his face that got killed? 20s, buried in Britain, London. I forgot. Okay, never mind.
Are you thinking about John Lennon from the Beatles?
Not John Lennon. We were talking about him tonight, and people have went by his grave, and they when I take a picture, they seen a manifestation of him. Died. I think he died in a car accident or something. Gosh, can't remember. He was in the 27 group. Jimi Hendrix. Who was the other two?
There's more than two.
Jim Morrison of the Doors and Janis Joplin.
Yeah, Jim Morrison. I was thinking of him, but I got the two confused.
Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse. There's a lot of members of the 27 Club.
So let's explore that one about Amy Winehouse. So what happened? Do you think that she was taken out? I don't really know that much.
Now, I've heard, now again, this is on the internet, so you can hear all kinds of things that, yeah, there was something going on there the night that she died. They heard screaming. There was blood everywhere. It was like some sort of sacrifice allegedly took place there in the place where she died. So again, there's a lot of strange deaths throughout rock and roll.
Well, and also the testimonies of people, you know, a lot of people say, oh, there's no blood eating, drinking, or any kind of satanic garbage like that. And that's not true. Look at who's that strange woman that does blood cooking, Abramovic. She's involved with that whole industry. And yeah, she does the whole blood cooking thing.
Yeah, I think Lady Gaga has been involved with some of that, and again, it's far-reaching.
Yeah, and now, like I said, as far as the occult of the ancient past and now, it's one big octopus, but with lots and lots of tentacles.
Definitely far-reaching, and again, in all forms of media, and as we can't stress here enough, they don't even attempt to hide it anymore with the symbolism and all the things that go along with that. Like in our day, Eric, it was, you know, it was kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah, it was there on the album covers and in the artwork and even in the lyrics. But a lot of my parents didn't really know what I was listening to or what went on at those concerts and things. Or I would have probably been forbidden to go to stuff like that.
Yeah, I think
Iron Maiden.
I think if my folks had really known,
exactly.
I probably would have been forbidden.
But I loved Iron Maiden back in the day. I saw them, I think, a total of like 30 something times over the years, and
oh wow,
it's quite a spectacle to anybody that's never been to a heavy metal concert with all the pyrotechnics. Of course, they had the Eddie corpse-like figure that would come out and do things, and
whole Eddie grotesque.
Yeah, it was quite a show.
Well, and not just not just only a show, but the musicianship, especially of Iron Maiden, the musicianship is absolutely it's phenomenal. It's undeniable. You know, the one thing with heavy metal that really separated it from every other genre of music was the musicianship. There are no other genres of music that play guitar the way heavy metal does. There's no other genres of music that can play guitar, bass, and drums the way heavy metal does. I mean, what guitarist outside of heavy metal plays better than Yngwie Malmsteen, Randy Rhoads, or Steve Vai, or Jimi Hendrix? I mean, you just don't find it. And especially if you were an Iron Maiden fan, in pop music or anything else, who plays the bass like Steve Harris? I mean,
I used to. I had the tablature one time, and I was trying to figure out one of his songs. I got like the first dozen or so notes, and I thought, yeah. And then I listened to it, and it was so fast you couldn't even keep up. I think a Trooper or something I was trying to play, like, and it's just it's that
the Trooper, Run to the Hills.
borders on the supernatural, just the amazing skill and speed and dexterity of these guys. And they're not even paying attention. They're not even they're just looking around and having a good time. But I guess it's just a dedication to the instrument and the music to be able to do that. And I just never had the time, patience, or the actual musical inclination to be able to do that. If I practiced every single day, I was at best mediocre. But those guys are just untouchable. But it makes you wonder: did they make some kind of deal to have those powers? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, again, we're just spitballing here, but I think some of that it does
Well,
border on supernatural.
if that wasn't the case, then I would definitely say they absolutely ignore the fact that God gave them that ability to be able to play with that type of skill. I mean, you listen to Rush, for example. Rush or Yes. Remember the band Yes? And I'm talking way before Asia days or the 80s. The complexity of Rush, of Yes's or King Crimson's music.
Yeah.
There's no pop, country, or any other cannot even come close to that as far as that kind of musicianship.
Indeed.
And again, if it's not, making deals with a demonic spirit to be able to do that, it is definitely not acknowledging the Lord God that gave them that ability from the time they were born. And now I'm not saying all rock musicians deny the fact that God gave them that talent, because I'm sure there are many out there that do acknowledge that.
Indeed.
But
I was painting with a broad
in
brush there, but
large,
it's what they do with that talent or how they choose to use that I think is what the issue really is.
Exactly. But I can confidently say this: point me a drummer of today's generation in the new genres of music that come anywhere near Neil Peart of Rush. Doesn't exist. Just my opinion.
Yeah, indeed. And I had a friend that totally idolized, just borderline worship Neil Peart, and he learned to play a lot of those drum solos and stuff. And he's just like, I don't see how the man does it. So many different things going on, both hands, both feet. And then he played a lot of things with foot pedals too. It was just, the triggering samples and things.
Yeah.
Much later in life, he just phenomenal. I saw him Rush a few times, and one of the first times I saw him, they were with a band, not Quiet Riot, but there was a Canadian band called Riot, and something had happened to the lead singer, and they couldn't appear that night. So Rush came out and did like a super long 3-hour concert and played stuff they don't normally play. And I think that was the first time I saw Rush. And it was just amazing, to sit there for 3 hours and just be blown away by these three men making all this music and noise. Incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Time was easy top. It's hard to believe there's only 3 people in that band.
Triumph. Yep. Very hard to believe that's just a 3-member band. But yeah, again, as far as going back to your question before, do a lot of these musicians make deals with the demonic? I think possibly some, but definitely a lot of them do not and will not acknowledge that it's the Lord God who endowed them with that gift before they ever even became musicians. It was already there, in other words.
And I think, those are God-given talents. Like my brother, he had all the musical talent in my family. The man could play guitar, banjo, harmonica, keyboards, and he played by ear, never had a lesson, couldn't read music. He just had the ability, but he used it for praise and worship. He was evangelical minister. It also had a really good praise and worship bands that would equal a lot of rock bands. I mean, everybody in that band was talented: the drummer, the bass player, the keyboardist, and then he accompanied them on guitar and things. And just it was amazing. I loved those praise and worship sessions. I mean, there was times when we wouldn't even get to the church part. The place would just, the Spirit would flow in there, and we didn't need to hear preaching. We were in touch with God right there in the music, and God is in the music.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Yeah, that's you could only imagine what it would be like if a lot of these musicians got saved and actually got involved in true praise and worship.
Yeah, indeed. And I've seen some of those Christian rock bands like Petra. I don't know if what's the guy, Greg Volts. I don't know if he's still with them or not, but I saw them at like a high school auditorium back in the day, and I was just blown away. There's some good musicmanship there, and they had a song.
I
God
remember.
gave rock and roll to you to get His message through to you, and then Kiss did their version of that. But and then they had another song called "Blinded Eyes," which the melody was almost exactly the same as a Sabbath song called "Country Girl." So it goes to show you, it's how you use those gifts and what you do with it, whether you're glorifying the Creator or the creation.
Exactly.
Well, gentlemen, sadly, we're just about out of time here for this episode of Everything Out There. As always, it's a pleasure having you guys here. We've covered a lot of strange ground tonight, but still in line with what we've been talking about. And I sense a part 3 and probably beyond for the kind of stuff we're talking about here. It's a pleasure having you on. Before we part here, if you have any words for the people, and also let them know where they can find you. And I'll put it in the show notes as well, the links to your Facebook page and your books.
Okay. Yeah, we are with Sound the Shofar Messianic Ministries, which can be found on Facebook. Love to hear from you, and you can message us, and we go on about 3 times a week with messages for Shabbat and Torah study and end time study during the week.
Yep, we're doing a lot of things with we address a lot of subjects that a lot of churches don't want to address. I'm telling you, if you're a follower of the Lord, people are curious about what's going on in the world today, and these things with paranormal activity, UFOs, and all this, it opens up the gospel because it opens up the spirit realm. And we talk about that. We take on subjects that nobody wants to take on. I've had people that offline that have tried to debate me or don't really know. And it's like, hey, tell me otherwise. That you can believe in a Messiah and resurrection, then why can't you believe the other part? So that's why we do what we do. So, yeah. And by the way, and I said this the last time, if anybody that listens to us is having trouble or wants to have us pray for them or talk to us about any of the stuff they're struggling with, please reach out to me and Brother Eric. You're welcome to instant message us. We're not these famous people that writes books and we can't come down to your level. We're just ordinary people that God has blessed us to do this. So please go join us. And if you got any questions, please instant message us or anything we can do to help out. How we can pray for you.
Absolutely. And these guys 100%. They're the real deal.
And we do have a few books out, and we're currently working on one. Always got a project going.
Yep. Good deal. Look forward to that one as well. I'll put the links into the books on Amazon. Well, again, pastors, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time and look forward to the next time we get to sit and chat. I'm loving this. Get to relive a little of the glory days when I really didn't know as much as I do now about what I was actually doing, and kind of ashamed of some of those things, but I did have a good time back in the day.
Same here.
Unknowingly. But thanks again. I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. I'm Steve Stockton. You've been listening to Everything Out There on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. I'll see you a little further on down the trail. Tell your animals I said hi. Good night, everybody.